Today, we're diving into something called cognitive control. And look, this isn't just about trying to change what you think, it's actually way deeper than that. We're talking about shaping the very process of how you think.
So let me ask you this. Are your thoughts really your own? It's a pretty big question, right? And it's exactly what we're going to dig into. We're going to break down the specific, nitty-gritty techniques people use to kind of sneak past your critical thinking and lead you to a certain conclusion. And the crazy part? A lot of the time, you don't even know it's happening.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First up, we'll look at how simple words and language get weaponized. Then we'll get into how reality itself gets distorted and oversimplified. And to wrap it all up, we'll explore the most extreme methods. We're talking about controlling someone's entire environment.
Okay, let's jump right into part one, weaponizing words and language. I mean, think about it. Words are the basic building blocks of how we think. And the techniques we're about to see, they're all designed to create this little emotional shortcut, right? To get a specific reaction out of you before your logical brain even has a chance to wake up.
So first up, we've got something called loaded language. This is all about picking words that are already packed with, a ton of emotional baggage. It's like injecting a feeling directly into a sentence, so you don't even need a real argument or any evidence to make your point.
And this slide is a perfect example. Just look at this. On the left, you have neutral terms. On the right, loaded ones. Public servant sounds pretty noble, right? But bureaucrat? That sounds like someone who loves red tape. Or how about estate tax versus death tax? One's a boring financial term, the other makes it sound like you're being punished for dying. It's the exact same thing, but the feeling you get is completely different.
All right, next up is a really subtle one. It's called paltering. And get this, it's basically the art of lying by only telling the truth. I know, it sounds weird, but you're not actually saying anything that's false. You're just very, very carefully choosing which true things to say to create a totally misleading picture.
And this hypothetical quote just nails it. I did not have textual relations with that chatbot. Technically, that's true. They didn't text, but it's designed to make you think nothing happened at all, when really they might have had, vocal relations. See, it's a denial that's not really a denial at all. Super sneaky.
Okay, so let's talk about obfuscation. Now, if paltering is like a precise surgical strike with the truth, obfuscation is just a giant smoke bomb of complexity. The whole point is to bury a simple, and usually inconvenient, truth under this huge mountain of jargon and confusing language so that nobody can figure out what's really going on. And to round out this first section, let's talk about rationalization. And honestly, this is something we probably all do. It's when you make a decision based on emotion or a gut feeling, and then you go back and build this perfect logical-sounding argument for it. When it's weaponized, it lets people feel really smart and logical about a choice they actually made for reasons they'd rather not admit to.
All right, that brings us to our second section, distorting and simplifying reality. Here, we're moving beyond just the words people use and into techniques that actively twist the frame of reality itself. These are tools designed to construct a very particular and often very false way of seeing the world.
And we're kicking it off with oversimplification. Real-world problems are complicated. They're messy. They take real thought. Well, this technique just throws all that out the window. It boils everything down to a catchy slogan or a simple good versus evil, black and white choice. And yeah, it feels simple and decisive, but what it's really doing is killing any chance for a nuanced conversation.
Okay, here's a classic. I guarantee you have seen this a million times. Taking quotes out of context. It's an incredibly powerful way to make it look like someone said the exact opposite of what they meant just by, chopping off the beginning or the end of their sentence.
And this slide shows you exactly how it works. Look at the full quote. While our opponent has some valid points, their overall plan is a disaster. Pretty clear, right? It's a condemnation. But you just snip out that middle part, and suddenly you have an ad that says, our opponent has some valid points. It makes it sound like a full-on endorsement. It's completely dishonest, but man, is it effective.
Next, we have something called the limited hangout. This term actually comes from the world of spies and intelligence. Here's the scenario. A big scandal is about to break. So what do? You strategically confess to a small, not-so-bad part of the story. It makes you look transparent, like you're coming clean. And hopefully, it gets everyone to stop digging for the much, much bigger truth you're still hiding.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly, doesn't it? You admit to this little 10% slice of the pie. You hang it out there for everyone to see. And that makes people think they've got the whole story, while the other 90% stays completely hidden.
Okay, this next one, pensée unique, which is French for single thought, is really important to understand. The goal here isn't just to argue that an opposing view is wrong. No. The goal is to make that other viewpoint seem immoral, totally socially unacceptable, basically to make it unthinkable. It's about shrinking the whole world of acceptable debate until there's only one thought left standing.
All right, let's get into our final section. And this is where things get really intense. We're talking about controlling the total environment. These tactics aren't just about swaying you on one issue or getting you to make one decision. This is about managing someone's entire reality.
And a classic example of this is a tactic often used by cults called love bombing. And it's a very clear step-by-step process. First, you just shower a new person with praise and affection. Make them feel like the most special person in the world. Step 2, you start to slowly cut them off from their old life, their friends, their family. And finally, step 3, they become totally dependent on the group for their entire sense of who they are.
Now this next one, operant conditioning, might sound like something you'd read about in a dusty old psychology textbook, but trust me, it is being used on a massive scale every single day. It's just a fancy term for a system of rewards and punishments designed to train people to behave in a certain way.
And just look at this table. It shows you exactly how social media platforms have pretty much perfected this. You post something the group approves of, boom, you get a reward, likes, shares, positive comments. But what happens if you say something that goes against the grain? Punishment, downvotes, public shaming. And over time, what does that do? It trains all of us to just self-censor and conform.
This brings us to milieu control. This is the big one. It's about creating a completely sealed-off information bubble. You manage a person's environment so tightly that they never come across an opposing viewpoint or a challenging idea. It's simple, really. If you can control everything a person sees and hears, you ultimately control what they think.
And this slide basically gives you the playbook for how to build that bubble. Your strict access to any outside news. You isolate people from anyone who doesn't believe. You create your own special language. You discourage critical thinking at every turn. It is a systematic process of taking apart someone's ability to think for themselves.
So, okay, after going through all of that, from sneaky loaded words all the way to total environmental control, it can feel pretty heavy, right? But here's the most important takeaway of all. The simple act of knowing these techniques exist, of being able to spot them, that is your single most powerful weapon against them. Just being aware is your first and best line of defense.
And really, that's the thought I want to leave you with. None of this is just theory or history. These techniques are out there, right now, all around us. You'll see them in ads, you'll see them in politics, you'll see them in online groups.
All right, today we're going to build a toolkit. This is your personal spotter's guide for one of the most powerful forces out there, propaganda. We're going to learn how to see it, how to name it, and most importantly, how to neutralize its effect on us. Let's jump in.
You've been there, right? We all have. You're in a debate online, maybe in the comments section, and all of a sudden the ground just shifts under your feet. You're left feeling confused, maybe a little angry, and you're not even sure how the conversation got so completely derailed. It feels like you're playing a game, but nobody ever told you the rules.
Well, that feeling, it's not an accident. It's often the result of very specific, time-tested techniques that are designed to control the narrative and get you off balance. So yeah, welcome to the information battlefield. Today, we're going to learn the strategy.
First, let's look at the offensive playbook. These are the proactive tools, the ones used to build a story from the ground up and make it feel solid, inevitable, and, well, true. These are the tools of attack.
It all starts with one of the most basic yet incredibly powerful tools in the box: repetition. See, our brains have this funny little shortcut. We tend to mistake something that's familiar for something that's accurate. So when we hear the same message enough times, our brain just kind of starts to accept it as true, even if there's no evidence. Psychologists have a name for this: the illusory truth effect.
And this is that principle in action. It's the engine that drives slogans, talking points, and yeah, unfortunately, some really big falsehoods. The message is just hammered home again and again and again until it carves out a little space in our minds and starts to feel like just common knowledge.
Next up is scapegoating. You've definitely seen this one. When things get complicated or tough, it is so much easier to create a simple villain than it is to actually solve the real problem. This technique takes all that public anger and frustration and just funnels it onto an easy target. It's a perfect distraction from the real issues. And then you've got transfer. This is all about the power of association. Think of a politician who's always standing in front of a giant national flag. The goal is to transfer your positive feelings about the flag, patriotism, respect, onto the person. It's a visual shortcut that completely bypasses your logical brain and goes straight for the emotions.
Now this is interesting. This slide breaks down two different ways to kind of borrow credibility. On the one hand, you've got testimonials. That's pretty straightforward, right? A famous person you admire says they like something. But on the other hand, you have the much more subtle third-party technique. This is where someone creates what looks like an independent source, like a research group or a concerned citizens organization, to push their message. One relies on fame, the other creates a totally false sense of objectivity.
Okay, so you've built your narrative. But what happens when people start poking holes in it? What happens when it comes under attack? Well, that's when you switch from offense to defense, and you pull out a whole new set of tools designed to protect your position at all costs.
The first line of defense is often whataboutism. And let's be clear, this isn't a real argument, it's an escape hatch. Instead of actually addressing a criticism, the speaker just tries to change the subject by pointing a finger and saying, yeah, but what about them? The goal is just to create chaos and totally derail the conversation.
And here's a perfect classic example. Notice how the response doesn't even try to deny the original charge. It doesn't offer any counterargument or evidence, it just pivots. It forces the person who made the accusation to suddenly start defending a completely different topic. The original point? It's just gone. The debate is neutralized.
Another really powerful defensive tool is the misuse of statistics. We're all taught to trust numbers, right? They feel so objective, so scientific. But data can be twisted and presented in a way to tell pretty much any story you want, giving a totally false conclusion the shiny, authoritative veneer of math.
Oh, this is a fantastic illustration of how that works. Just look at these two charts. They are showing the exact same data. But in the first chart, where the scale goes from 0 to 100, the differences look tiny, almost non-existent. But in the second chart, just by changing the scale to zoom in on the very top, those same tiny differences suddenly look like a massive, dramatic gap. The data didn't change one bit, only the story it was forced to tell.
Okay, this one is incredibly sneaky. The unstated assumption works by smuggling a controversial idea into the conversation without ever actually saying it out loud. The entire argument is built on this hidden foundation that you're forced to accept just to even participate in the discussion.
And this question is the perfect example. It's a classic for a reason. I mean, how do you even answer that? If you give a date, you're admitting you used to cheat. If you try to deny it, you just sound defensive. The question itself is a trap, and all of its power comes from that unstated, totally unproven assumption that you were a tax cheat to begin with.
And finally, we have semantic satiation. This is basically a tactic of neutralization. You take a powerful word that your opponent uses, a word like justice or freedom or reform, and you just repeat it over and over and over again. You apply it to everything until it just becomes meaningless noise. You drain the word of all its power by turning it into an empty buzzword.
So here's the most important point. These tools are almost never used by themselves. They're layered. They're combined into these really sophisticated strategies. Let's take a look at how they might all come together in something like a coordinated smear campaign.
And this slide just lays out the playbook perfectly. Look at how the offensive and the defensive tools work in tandem. It starts with scapegoating. You pick a target. Then comes the attack, using repetition to hammer home a big lie. To make it all look legit, they'll use misused statistics as proof. And then finally, if anyone dares to challenge it, they throw up the defensive shield of whataboutism to deflect the criticism and attack the critic. It's a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of disinformation.
Seeing all of this laid out like that, yeah, it can feel a little disheartening. But listen, the goal here isn't to make you cynical or paranoid, it's to make you resilient. The goal is empowerment. Just being able to identify and name these techniques, that's the first and most crucial step to taking away their power over you. The moment you can look at an argument and say, ah, that's whataboutism, or wait, they're using the transfer technique there, you break the spell. It lets you take a step back, evaluate the message on its own merits, and just think more clearly.
So, we'll leave you with this thought. Knowing these techniques, it gives you a defensive shield against manipulation, for sure. But it also gives you a much deeper understanding of how communication actually works. So the real question is, once you can see the architecture of these arguments, how can you use that knowledge to build more honest, more constructive, and clearer conversations?
You ever get that feeling that there's some kind of hidden script out there, one that's designed to turn us against each other? Well, and we're not just pulling back the curtain on this division playbook. We're going to show you exactly how it works, page by page. I mean, really think about it. It's a feeling a lot of us have, right? The disagreements you have, maybe with neighbors or people at work, even your own family. They just feel bigger somehow, amplified, almost engineered. Like some invisible force is shoving us all into opposite corners, making it almost impossible to find any common ground. And here's the thing you have to understand. That feeling isn't just in your head. Division isn't some bug in the system, it's a feature. It's a calculated, deliberate strategy used by people who actually benefit when we're all confused and angry. Today, we're exposing those tactics. All right, so let's get into it. Chapter 1 of the playbook is all about twisting your perception of reality. Because, think about it, if you can control what people believe is real, you can pretty much control them. This is all about poisoning the well of information itself. It all starts with the most basic tool in the shed, disinformation. Now, we're not talking about a simple mistake or a rumor that gets out of hand. No, this is the intentional creation and spread of lies, like a fake social media post about some new community policy that's totally made up, designed for one reason, to spark outrage and distrust before anyone even has a chance to check the facts. See, the real goal isn't just to make you believe a lie, it's to make you doubt what's actually true. And that doubt, it leads right into the next play, FUD. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. The whole point here isn't to convince you of their side of the story. It's to paralyze you. It's done by spreading whispers that, a new technology might have weird side effects, or that a political candidate has a questionable past, all without a shred of proof. It just floods your brain with what-ifs, making it pretty much impossible to trust anything or anyone. Now, take that FUD tactic and just supercharge it for the internet age. What you get is something called the fire hose of falsehood. This is a tactic of pure overwhelm. It's not about crafting one really believable lie. It's about blasting out so many contradictions and crazy things that your brain's critical thinking just short circuits. And this just nails how it works. You've got a massive, high volume of junk information. It's multi-platform, so it's hitting you from every angle. Social media, fake news sites, everywhere. It's rapid and it never stops. And here's the key. There is zero commitment to truth or consistency. The goal is just to exhaust you, not persuade you. It wears you down until you just give up trying to figure out what's real. The final move in poisoning reality is to just change the words we use. It's called euphemism. I mean, look at this. Civilian deaths sounds awful, right? But the sterile, corporate-sounding collateral damage, not so bad. Silencing dissent becomes aggressive criticism. It's all about putting a soft, fuzzy glove on a really ugly reality. Okay, so once reality is all blurred and confusing, the playbook moves on to hijacking your feelings. You can argue with logic, but raw emotion, that is a much, much more powerful driver of human behavior. This next chapter is all about how they twist your heart, not just the facts. This is probably the most dangerous play in this whole chapter. It's the huge difference between saying, I disagree with their economic plan, and calling them evil monsters who want to destroy our way of life. The moment you demonize an opponent, you're not just arguing anymore. You're creating a moral justification for doing anything to stop them. What's so fascinating here is how this tactic contrasts with the last one. See, manipulation isn't just about fear and hate. It can also be about creating these artificial highs. Think about a leader who's facing, say, terrible economic news, and then suddenly throws a massive, week-long national festival. It's totally manufactured bliss, designed to make people feel so good they don't notice the massive problems bubbling just under the surface. And here's an emotional trigger that is just incredibly effective. You wrap a policy or some kind of action in the flag. By doing that, any criticism of that action suddenly becomes criticism of the country itself. And just like that, a simple policy debate gets framed as, are you with us or are you a traitor? It is a wickedly powerful way to shut down any and all dissent. And this is the long game. Demoralization. It's this slow, grinding campaign to convince an entire population that their institutions are corrupt, that their values are totally meaningless, and that things like voting just don't matter. The end goal? To make people so hopeless and cynical that they truly believe nothing they do will ever make a difference. And a demoralized people, well, they won't fight back. So, you've poisoned reality. You've hijacked emotions. What's the final chapter? Well, it's about locking down power and making sure nobody can ever challenge you. These are the endgame moves. This is literally the oldest trick in the book, and for good reason. It works like a charm. A united population is a threat to power. So what do? You break them into little squabbling factions. A classic example is a manager who plays up small rivalries between departments to keep them competing with each other, instead of, uniting to ask for better pay. They're way too busy fighting each other to notice who's really pulling the strings. And honestly, this slide says it all, doesn't it? The whole goal is to take something that's unified and just create distance, to wedge suspicion and conflict into places where there used to be solidarity. It is, at its core, about breaking bonds between people. This is just a raw, unfiltered show of force. A diktat isn't a negotiation. It's not a compromise. It's a declaration. Imagine after a big dispute, one side just presents a list of non-negotiable terms designed to humiliate the other side. It's one party saying, here are the terms, we're not discussing it. It makes it crystal clear who's in charge. And finally, for anyone who still dares to speak up, there's flack. This is a coordinated storm of criticism, personal attacks, and harassment. For example, a scientist who publishes a study that's inconvenient for a powerful industry might suddenly find themselves swarmed by an online mob attacking their character, their credentials, everything. The goal is to make the personal cost of speaking out so high that most people decide it's just safer to stay quiet. So, that's the playbook. It's a lot, I know. It's heavy stuff. But understanding these tactics isn't about becoming cynical or paranoid. It's actually about becoming immune. It's about seeing the game for what it is. When you boil it all down, this is the end result they're after. Poisoning reality is meant to make you confused. Attacking your emotions is meant to make you reactive and irrational. And all those power plays, they're designed to leave you feeling completely and utterly powerless. Confusion, emotion, powerlessness, that's the state they want you in. But here it is. This is the antidote. This is the whole point of this explainer. The moment you can put a name to a tactic, oh, that's disinformation, or that's FUD, or wow, they're demonizing them, it loses its invisible power over you. You can suddenly see the gears turning. And we're going to pull back the curtain on some of the most subtle and, honestly, some of the most common techniques of logical manipulation. These are the kinds of tools that get used everywhere, from ads to news headlines, even in arguments with family, all designed to win a debate without actually having a solid point. You know that feeling, right? I mean, you walk in with all the facts on your side, your argument feels totally rock solid, but somehow you walk away feeling confused, maybe a little outmaneuvered, and you might even start to doubt yourself. It's maddening. Well, here's the thing. It's probably because you were playing a totally different game than your opponent. You were trying to have an honest debate, but they were playing to win, using a set of rules you didn't even know existed. So today, we're going to learn the rules of their game so you can spot it from a mile away. Okay, first up, let's talk about the really subtle forms of manipulation. These are the techniques that are so tricky because they don't use outright lies. Instead, they just bend your perception of reality, kind of guiding you to a conclusion without you even noticing. A big one is called framing. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like this. It's like choosing a very specific window to look through. Now, the view you see is real, but the frame itself decides what you see and, maybe more importantly, what you don't see. It sets the terms of the debate before a single word is even spoken. And you can see just how powerful this is. I mean, is it a public safety initiative or is it mass surveillance? Is it tax relief or is it tax cuts for the wealthy? See, the words chosen here are way more than just labels. They're entire arguments packed into a couple of words, designed to get an emotional reaction from you before you've had a chance to even think about the facts. Okay, the half-truth. This one is so deceptive because it's really hard to argue with. The statement itself is technically true, which means if you try to challenge it directly, you're the one who looks like you don't know what you're talking about. The real poison is in what's being left out. This is the perfect example, right? 50% less fat. I mean, that sounds fantastic, but the real question you have to ask is, less fat than what? Than another snack? Or, like this example, than a stick of butter? That missing piece of context isn't some small detail. It's the whole story. Now, this next one is a deeply personal and frankly destructive tactic. The entire goal of gaslighting is to just slowly chip away at your confidence, in your own mind, in your own memories, making you feel like you have to depend on the manipulator to know what's real. It's all about control. And this is such a classic line. It's so insidious because it does two things at once. First, it dismisses your feelings. They're not valid. You're just overly sensitive. And second, it rewrites history, making you think your own memory is broken. It's a really powerful way to grab control of a conversation. All right, next up, we have a classic sales and persuasion technique called the foot in the door. It works on a really simple principle of human psychology, getting someone to say yes to something really small and easy. Because once we say yes once, we want to be consistent, so we're way more likely to say yes to the next bigger thing. And here's exactly how it plays out. The small ask, hey, can you sign this online petition? It costs you nothing, it's super easy. But the moment you sign it, you've psychologically committed. You're not just a random person anymore, you're a supporter of the cause. So when that big ask comes later for $100 and your whole weekend, it feels a lot harder to say no. And this whole family of tactics has a few other cousins. You've got guilt by association, where you just link an idea to a group people already dislike. Then there's labeling, just slap a word like extremist on someone so you don't have to deal with their argument. And latitudes of acceptance, that's the slow, steady process of making a crazy idea seem normal over time. They all do the same thing, rig the game before it even starts. Okay, let's shift gears. We're moving into our second category now. Tactics that are way less about subtle manipulation and way more about just brute force. The goal here isn't to convince you, it's to exhaust you, to confuse you, and in the end, just shut you down. So, first up is the Gish Gallop. You can think of this as the debate version of a fire hose. The whole point isn't to be accurate or right, it's just to be fast. The person just fires off a dozen different claims, knowing that it takes way, way longer to disprove a bad argument than it does to just make one up. And it feels something like this. They'll just hit you with, well, what about the treaty from '87 and all the economic data is wrong and you completely ignored the ethical problems and last year's report says something else. And what about the effects on trade and my expert says you're wrong and you never even addressed the footnote on page 42. See? By the time you pick even one of those to respond to, they just move on and it looks like you couldn't answer all the other points. This is a pretty similar idea, but instead of arguments, it uses data. It's basically a smokescreen of complexity. They'll bury you in hundreds of pages of reports and spreadsheets, making the whole topic seem so incredibly complicated that you just give up and trust whatever summary they give you. And this is the classic move, right here. It's an impossible chore that's disguised as a good faith offer. The sheer volume of the data becomes a weapon. It's a wall designed to shut down any real discussion and just make them look like the authority. Now, let's look at a tactic that works by being empty instead of full. Glittering generalities are all about using these big, emotionally appealing words that everyone loves, but that nobody can really pin down. They feel great, but they're basically weightless. I mean, think about it. Who is against hope, or justice, or a better way? Nobody, right? And that's the point. These words are like a blank screen, and we project all of our own desires onto them. The speaker doesn't need a real plan, they just need a powerful vague word that you can fill with your own meaning. So we've seen how reality can be framed and how debates can be totally overwhelmed. So the big question now is, what do we actually do about it? How can we defend ourselves against this stuff and pull the conversation back to something more honest? Here's the most important thing to remember. Every single one of these techniques has the same goal. They are all shortcuts. They are tricks designed to get around having a real, good faith argument based on facts and logic. They manipulate, they overwhelm, they exploit emotions, anything to avoid an honest debate. And that brings us to your most powerful tool, just being able to spot the tactic. The second you see what they're doing, you can name it. Now, you don't have to literally yell, "That's a Gish Gallop," at someone. You can just calmly say, "Whoa, that's a lot of different points at once. Can we just focus on the first one for a second?" Or, "That's one way to frame it. Could we maybe look at it from this angle too?" By simply showing you see the game, you can choose not to play it and gently guide things back to the actual facts. Learning this stuff is not about becoming more cynical or getting into more fights. It's about becoming a clearer thinker. It gives you the tools to demand better conversations from other people. And hey, from yourself too.
We're cracking open the secret playbook used to build the very narratives that shape our world.
And you're not wrong to feel that way. You see, powerful stories, they're almost never an accident. So let's dive right in and see how they're actually built, starting from page 1, chapter 1.
Yeah, these narratives are put together with some serious precision. They're architected, really, built piece by piece using a very specific set of tools, all designed to influence how you think, how you feel, and ultimately how you act.
All right, first up, let's get into the architect's playbook itself. This is the blueprint, the master plan for building belief from absolute scratch. So, the very first move in this playbook, it's all about controlling the playing field. Think of it like this. It's about drawing the map of reality for everyone else and setting the boundaries of the conversation before anyone else even gets a chance to speak. And the first tool they use is something called agenda setting. It's incredibly subtle but so powerful. By just highlighting certain issues while totally ignoring others, they get to define what you think is important. They're literally drawing your map of reality by deciding which landmarks even show up.
Okay, so if agenda setting is all about carefully drawing the map, the big lie, well, that just drops a brand new, impossible-to-miss landmark right in the middle of it. And the reason this technique works is just its sheer audacity. I mean, the lie is so huge, so completely reality-bending that our brains kind of short-circuit. We just think, no way, surely no one would have the guts to make up something that big.
In this comparison, it just perfectly shows the two sides of controlling the playing field, doesn't it? Agenda setting, that's all about directing your focus. It's a gentle guide for your attention. But the big lie, that's about dictating belief. It flat out tells you what to see. So one manages the conversation, and the other one, it just invents the topic out of thin air.
Okay, let's move on to the next chapter in the playbook. Once the stage is set, the game changes. The next step is to just completely bypass our logical, rational minds and go straight for something way more powerful, our primal emotions and our social wiring.
First up is the appeal to fear. And let me tell you, this is one of the oldest tricks in the book for a reason. By showing you something scary, it completely hijacks your brain's threat detection system. Suddenly, logic is just gone, and that primal need for safety totally takes over. And when that happens, we're way more likely to accept solutions we would normally question. It's all about making you feel something before you even get a chance to think. Now, this next one, it's kind of like a shortcut. Instead of trying to create a new feeling from scratch, it just taps into biases that are already there. You see, by framing a new idea so that it confirms a prejudice someone already has, the narrative just feels, well, instantly familiar. And even more dangerously, it feels intuitively true, all because it's validating a belief they already hold deep down. So after hacking our individual emotions, fear, prejudice, the playbook shifts gears. The focus moves from targeting you and me as individuals to targeting our deepest social instinct. And what's that? It's that fundamental human need to belong.
And this brings us to the classic bandwagon effect. You've definitely seen this one. It's all about creating the impression that everybody is doing it, that a belief is already the majority opinion. This totally exploits our deep-seated fear of being the odd one out, of being left out of the group. And that pressure to just conform, it can be absolutely immense.
But then there's inevitable victory, which takes this whole thing a step further. It's not just saying, hey, everyone's doing this right now. No, it's saying this movement is the future. It's on an unstoppable march forward. And that tactic, wow. It makes you feel like if you don't jump on board, you're not just going to be left out of the group, you're going to be left behind by history itself. Talk about pressure. Do you see the difference there? It's subtle, but it's absolutely crucial. Join the crowd is all about social pressure in the present, right now. Inevitable victory is about historical pressure from the future. But at the end of the day, they're both preying on the same desire we all have, to be on the winning side. They just play with different timelines.
Okay, so the stage is set, emotions are running high, but a powerful narrative still needs a compelling cast of characters. Because let's be honest, who delivers the message is often just as important, if not more important, than the message itself.
And to make sure that message really sticks, the playbook rolls out 3 main character types, or archetypes. Each one is designed to build a very specific kind of connection with you, the audience. We're talking trust, desire, or, in some cases, outright devotion.
So first up, we have the plain folk character. This is the person who's presented as just an average Joe, a regular citizen, just like you and me. The whole goal here is to build trust, to create this sense of a shared identity. They want you to think, hey, they're one of us, even when, behind the scenes, they might be representing some really powerful elite interests.
Next, we've got the beautiful people archetype.
This one's pretty straightforward. The technique is to associate a cause with really attractive, successful, or famous people. It taps right into our aspirations. We see these folks we admire, and the message, whether we realize it or not, is pretty clear. Hey, if you want to be successful and desirable like them, you should probably believe what they believe.
And that brings us to the final, and maybe the most powerful character, the leader at the center of a cult of personality. Now, this leader isn't someone you're supposed to relate to, or even just aspire to be like. Oh no. They are elevated to this heroic, almost godlike status. The goal here is to create a figure who is completely beyond criticism, someone you worship, not someone you question.
And you'll hear language that sounds exactly like this. This kind of over-the-top, unquestioning flattery, it isn't just praise. It's a tool. It's used to put that leader up on a pedestal so high that any kind of criticism, any question at all, feels like an attack on the savior themselves.
So, the big question is, how does all of this stuff, the controlled reality, the emotional triggers, the social pressure, these larger-than-life characters, how does it all come together and actually, stick in our minds for the long haul?
Well, there are some deeper methods working in the background, almost like a psychological glue. You've got techniques like classical conditioning. That's where you repeatedly link a symbol with an emotion until you can't separate the two. And then there's exploiting cognitive dissonance, where a specific belief is offered up as the only way to solve some kind of painful mental conflict you're having. These are the things that really cement the narrative over time.
So, when you really strip it all down, the playbook is, well, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Step 1, control the reality. Step 2, trigger the emotions. Step 3, build the crowd. And the final step, anoint a hero to lead the whole show. Look, knowing these plays, it doesn't have to make you cynical.